Coogs house. The University of Houston has turned the city into a basketball town if it wasn't already. But how many teams does the city have room for? Let's jump in.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Coogs, especially everydayers out there. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you're a mountainy vacation person, a beach vacation person, a city vacation person, what kinds of things do you like to do when you have your druthers? Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, so it help you find tickets to do those things wherever you're going. But more on that fun later as we look at the Houston Cougar women's basketball program being built kind of before our very eyes. Now, if you'll notice, a lot of this off-season talk, hence the question about vacations, is about building teams in the off-season. Men's basketball program has kind of been hot lately. There's a lot of news. It's football spring game this weekend. We'll have more on that throughout the week. But today's show, we're looking at what it takes to build that women's basketball program and why there's such great foundations, what some of that roster may look like in the second segment. But first and foremost, new head coach Matthew Mitchell is assembling a little bit of an all-star cast of characters on his coaching staff. And I think that symbolizes something pretty special. For instance, one of his first hires as head basketball coach at the University of Houston, Matthew Mitchell's, was to hire Amy Tilley as a chief of staff. She'd been an assistant AD, director of basketball ops for a women's basketball program at Kentucky. She'd been at Kentucky kind of since 2008. She graduated there in 2007, worked under Mitchell there, was a head coach at a high school in 2010-11, but spent most of her life working in Kentucky, very close with the Mitchell family. And she's going to be the person like keeping everything running. She's going to do all of that all those duties for Mitchell. And I think what's awesome about that is like he's already delegating that. The basketball program on the women's side needs a new revamping in a lot of ways to kind of bring people back in as it's building itself back up. Amy Tilley's involved in making sure that those things all run smoothly. I think it's smart of Mitchell to have someone delegated to that. He's also been pretty smart about what he's done in building his coaching staff around himself. He went out and got an assistant coach, an associate head coach, I guess. The assistant coach most recently hired is Anthony Anderson, who was at SMU last few years, UTEP before that, UT Rio Grande Valley. Paul Quinn's an NAIA school. He's an associate head coach there, and he's also at Lamar State Junior College. So he spent over a decade, close to 15 years, coaching in and around the state of Texas. Really, really familiar with the area. He did play his own college ball at FIU. That's Anthony Anderson. He did before FIU, though. He was at a junior college, Cedar Valley Junior College as well. He's from Seidel, Louisiana. So he gets this region. Anthony Anderson's recruited this region, recruited high-end talent in this region, coached the backcourt women at SMU, including an American Athletic Conference Player of the Year in Tiara Young. He's really demonstrated a great eye for talent and has been involved in the crucial development of some high-end talent in women's basketball. He steps on campus as an assistant, the most recent hire in the Matthew Mitchell staff. The other one worth mentioning is the associate head coach, one of his earlier hires, Matthew Mitchell's that is, and that's Demetria Buchanan. She's the associate head coach officially. She had the same title at Auburn for the last few years. She's on staff as an assistant coach or as the associate head coach since 2021. There, she was at Kansas. Before that, Texas Tech before that, and Stephen F. Austin even before that. So she's familiar again with Texas, the Big 12, high-level basketball. Again, Auburn just recently. While she was at Auburn, she was a star recruiter, helped rebuild that program. They were up to 20 plus wins in her third season and beyond. When she got to Auburn, really turned that program around as well. Pretty influential in getting the second five-star in program history to Kansas in 2015. Tech has a great women's basketball history. She's a part of that as well as an assistant coach. She's, I think, perhaps more important to this program, though. She's local. She went to Jones High School. She's a Houstonian. She played at A&M when A&M was like winning multiple Big 12 championships in the 2000s. She's a really, really well-versed woman in women's high school and in college basketball in the greater Houston area. And I think we look at the staff, what you're seeing a lot of is people with a lot of experience. And I think that's really important when we bring in a guy like Matthew Mitchell, who has fantastic experience on his resume, but has had to take a break since he stepped down in 2020 with his injury, right? And so when you look at all of the pieces around him, he's bringing in people that have continued to do the work. He's surrounding himself with people that are successful. He's surrounding himself with people set up for success. And I would imagine it's also really important that his two coaching hires, Demetria Buchanan and Anthony Anderson, are both really familiar with recruiting Texas. Mitchell comes in having built, I think the graphic they put out was like 6 or 7 WNBA draft picks while he was at Kentucky. He knows how to coach. He knows how to identify talent. But Buchanan and Anderson are going to help him get in the door at high schools in Texas to get those recruits on campus. That's going to be a big deal. I also think it's worth pointing out that, it's nice to have someone doing the chief of staff job that worked with him so directly and never stopped working either when Mitchell had to step down himself. Mitchell's doing a great job outlining this kind of stuff. Actually, he's got his own YouTube channel I want to reference a couple times in this. They're putting out like 15 minutes here and there, like once a week-ish. It's not like a big channel or anything like that, but he is very vocal in his thoughts, and you can see, frankly, I think he's a very strong-willed person built on a lot of discipline. Well, you see that discipline play out in how you look at these other coaches' resumes and like the kinds of programs they are coming from. I'm really, really impressed by the coaching staff he's put together. He's got people coming from SMU, an ACC school, and Auburn, an SEC school, to work for basically the exact same title at the University of Houston. Now, we know what Houston can be, and I think it's not going to make it'll make a lot of sense to people down the line when they see what Houston is later. Of course, you'd leave an SEC school to come have the same title at the University of Houston. Of course, you'd leave an ACC school to come have the same title at the University of Houston. But he's doing it before it's been built to that. He's pulling people in his name, his cachet, his resume is pulling people into that to come sign up to coach at Houston, to sign to recruit to Houston early on in that. And so I think that it's worth pointing out that he's doing a pretty stellar job of pulling in assistant coaches right now. It's creating a fun buzz around the program. And I think the more you pay attention to what's going on here, it is fairly behind the scenes. It's not the big ordeal. I mean, the WNBA draft was Monday night, which admittedly was kind of my carryover and covering women's basketball on Tuesday morning. Thought that there's some buzz out there. Might as well get out there and talk about the Houston program while it's out. But I will point out that there's a void in this city in terms of women's basketball, and pulling in a staff with a bunch of experienced people from high-end programs or high-end conferences is a great way to kind of seize some of that void. I want to talk about the players that they're talking about adding in here in a second. Before we get too far, today's show is, as I reminded you earlier, brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. The Rockets are in those NBA playoff games. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's an electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting, because Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices in the app actually can go down as tip-off gets closer. The last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I like Game Time because the all-in pricing means no surprises, no surprise fees at checkout. You see it, you pay it. That's it. That's the whole deal. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKED on college for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code locked on college, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices. It's Game Time. Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Coogs here, talking about the development, the build, the recreation of Houston women's basketball. Now, I want to say and point out that part of the reason that Houston had so many problems just last season was it was hard at times to construct a roster that had healthy players at the basic 8-person rotation. Like, they struggled to have a fully healthy roster a lot last season. They struggled to have a fully available roster a lot last season. And I want to point out, too, that TCU was in the exact same boat 2 years ago. TCU, at mid-semester, was pulling in women that had played high school basketball and were on campus with a scholarship to other sports to play for their basketball program. 2 years later, that basketball program won the Big 12 and got to the Elite Eight. I'm not saying Houston's going to do it that fast. I am saying it can be done that fast. And I am saying Houston, as we'll talk about in the final segment, has all the resources to do it that fast. And one of the biggest things that you saw TCU do in the course of doing that was utilize the transfer portal to expedite the process. They went out and got a great coach. Houston, check that box. They retained the players that could make a difference. Houston will be checking that box in the coming days as they finalize things like that. And then they went out and got key transfer pieces out there, and Houston is looking to check that box as well. A couple players here I'm pulling up online. Admittedly, I'm still working sources to get better intel on what's happening on the inside of the program. Obviously, sources are always confidential, and so I'm not going to go out there. But I'm working on plug things in there. I'm working a lot off the surface here and kind of some aggregation kind of techniques to figure out exactly what's happening here. But Miyomi McMiller is a 5'8" guard from Rutgers, and she listed a top 6, and then very shortly thereafter, 3 of those 6 got nixed, taken out. And Houston is one of the schools left over. Now, Miyomi is from Silver Spring, Maryland, but interestingly, she's transferring out of Rutgers, and no school like close to Maryland is in her top 3. So I don't know that close to home is going to really matter. 18.5 points per game, electric score when she's able to play. Played 21 games last year. And frankly, when you've seen the kind of guards that Matt Miller put out when he was at Kentucky, McMiller kind of feels very similar. She's 5'8", shifty, strong, similar kind of game to a lot of those kind of guards you saw at Kentucky in the 2010s. Houston, it sounds like, might be in her final 3. And I really think something to keep an eye on with McMiller here is that she signed an NIL deal with the Jordan brand. And those are explicitly not necessarily tied to what they will wear on the floor with their college basketball programs. That you saw Cooper Flagg signed with New Balance, but Duke wore Nike, right? Like, this is not uncommon for high-end college basketball players. I do think, though, as I sit here with a Jordan brand Houston Cougar hat, have a couple others in the room around me as well. I do think, if I'm being honest, that there could be some sway there where maybe that she's not getting pushed by Jordan brand into it, but she's like, I got all this cool swag, all this cool gear or whatever. And, maybe there's some benefit in her NIL package to wear it more often. And if she wears it more often, that's good for her. And the University of Houston would allow her to wear it the most often, right? Like, I think there's some way to play that up as well. Now, I will point out that some NIL deals are tied to the schools. It does not look like, in what I can find online, that's what the case here with McMiller's Jordan brand deal. But keep an eye on that one, because I think there's a connection there, especially when you start looking at what schools that she's got left on her top 3. I think Houston being the Jordan brand school could be a big, big deal. Then you factor in the way that she'd fit into Miller's system and stuff, that from when she was at Kentucky and all that. Similarly, Marley Washenitz, Pittsburgh guard, 5'7". Looks like Houston's reached out and made contact with her. Houston would like to have her. She's a 9.5 points per game person. She's dramatically improved her three-point percentage from year to year, with the big jump being between her sophomore and junior year. Just last year, she went from 30-ish% to just over 30% on 4 attempts per game to over almost 36% on 5 attempts per game while she was at Pitt. Rising senior, started the last 2 years, full seasons at Pitt. Will be a great veteran to have on the program as you're trying to set a culture, plays the game the right way and all that kind of stuff. I think the issue here will be the distance from home, where McMiller didn't appear to have that in any of her preferences. Washenitz, I think, does. And just not that she has West Virginia listed super high on her list or anything like that, but it feels like there's a lot more of that Mid-Atlantic region in her list. Houston's reached out. Houston's interested. It does look like I don't have any official news on the offer, I guess, but they're interested. But I do think that she might be one that gets away. At some point you can't out-recruit geography. We talked about that with Cole Pete on the boys' side, right? At some point that's important to some people. One interesting one, or at least one that I'm interested in, is a woman who's actually got 4 years of eligibility left after having been in college for 3. And we'll get into that, how that works out. But Freddie Wallace is a 6'2" forward from University of Kansas, has her name in the transfer portal. And with the new transfer rules, we'll get to this in a second, she actually has all of her eligibility left. She played 2 years at a junior college, was an All-American at the junior college level at 18.4 points per game and 6.8 rebounds per game, a real dynamic post player, incredible motor when she can go. She then transferred to Kansas at a junior college ranks and got hurt and needed to use a medical red shirt. With the new transfer rules, her junior college years do not count against her eligibility. Her medical redshirt year does not count against her eligibility. And so she's a dominant player when healthy, that is 3 years into college and would have 4 years of eligibility. I'm not saying that you have to build your culture around someone like that, but I think that's a pretty good way to start it. She's got double-digit schools reached out to her. She's heard from Houston. I do think, for what it's worth, that she is a high-end Big 12 player. I also think that it's worth pointing out that while she is from Lincoln, Nebraska, and went to Butler Community College, when he was at his peak of recruiting at Kentucky, big brand, admittedly, but Matthew Mitchell was able to get a lot of that central part of the United States to come to Kentucky. I would think that he has some of the same ties still. And I wonder if, part of the connection here in Houston reaching out to Freddie Wallace, that is the woman we're talking about here, if part of that is ultimately because he still has some of those connections to that region. Again, she's been reached out to by double-digit schools. She may get great offers across all of them and whatever, and end up picking somewhere else. But ultimately, you see the kind of players Houston's going for are home run kind of players, right? They're not going for, players coming up from getting 12 points a game at some small school, but, has some obscure talent. They're trying to find a diamond in the rough. They're going for big pieces here, and I really, really like that. I think splashing things are going to be what helps get some eyeballs on this program, and I really, really like the direction that Mitchell and company are going with some of this recruiting, because I think Houston's built for success if someone comes in and builds it. And so I want to talk about why that is, what that means in just a second. Before we get to any of that, today's show is, again, brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account, wonder where'd all the money go? Happens sometimes. You've been dining out, shopping, entertainment, Final Four swag, tickets, whatever. Easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. I love that apps are all in one place. It's all very easy to use. I'm not the tech person, It's very easy to use, all that in one place. Stop managing money, start building wealth with Monarch Money. Take control of your finance. Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off the first year. You heard that correct. 50% off for the whole first year at monarchmoney.com. Just use code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Bargains with Locked On Coogs here, talking about the Houston women's basketball program. We talked about how Matthew Miller is assembling Matthew Mitchell. Sorry, I got McMiller as also on my notes here. Matthew Mitchell is assembling a elite coaching staff. How he is reaching out to high-end players in the transfer portal, and I think that's because there's real potential here, like we saw with TCU, to turn the program around dramatically and quickly, and Houston is built to sustain that success once it starts. For all the things everyone loved about Huey as a person, the program never really got off the ground under Coach Huey before. Again, great guy, program just didn't get off the ground, right? Once this program is off the ground and running, I feel very confident that it's going to continue to sprint, right? It's got all the amenities, facilities, Jordan brand deals, etc., that the men's team has. And I want to stress how significant an advantage that is. When other women's programs come through Houston as visiting teams, they're typically in awe of the kinds of locker rooms and weight rooms and those kinds of, it's all the same high-end stuff, right? I think it's really important to keep an eye on. It also, for what it's worth, and this is more common in other elite men's and women's programs, the UConn, the LSUs, right? Duke for the time at a minute here and there, right? Where both programs are having their moment in the sun. But like a Nike deal or an Adidas deal or whatever kind of extends to both programs. Houston's already got that with Jordan Brand extending to both programs at the high end level of the Jordan Brand deal here. And the women's program hasn't held up there into the bargain yet. Now, it's already set up for when they do, and it's a great recruiting tool, whether it's recruiting Miyomi McMiller, who we pointed out has the NIL deal with Jordan Brand already, or if it's just pulling in someone who likes the sneakers. I want to stress high school kids can pick programs. NIL dollars are a big deal, but they're not the only deal. You see kids pick Oregon because of the uniforms, right? The Jordan Brand thing is going to carry a lot of weight. Trust me. The other thing I'll point out, though, is that it's the best recruiting area region you could have, arguably, in America for women's basketball. Now, I want to point out that that's not just me saying it. Coach Matthew Mitchell has said it as well. Like I said it earlier in the show, he's got his own podcast. He does a once-a-week show, 15 minutes, the Coach Matthew Miller Show. Coach Matthew Mitchell show. I'm gonna say that wrong a bunch of times because her name, McMiller, is on my screen, and I'm gonna get that wrong a bunch of times. Coach Matthew Mitchell show on YouTube, and he said in his own words that this program had kind of underperformed relative to the tools at their disposal previously. And he didn't say underperform from a national perspective. He was respectful. He was like, there's a lot of tools here to grow and develop this program, and they hadn't really done winning that reflects those tools. He's done winning without those tools. They had some good tools, I guess, as well at Kentucky, but there were different tools for sure, and he sees this as a moment to seize the opportunity. I would also point out the state of Texas has had multiple draft picks, and as recently as this year's draft, yes, they went to Alabama and Harvard and other places, but the state of Texas puts out pro-women talent. And Texas had 8 of the top 100 of ESPN recruiting in the class of 2025, 4 of them from Greater Houston. The number 1 girl, I guess, was from Lubbock, but she played AAU for Cy-Fair Pro Skills. And they're going to places like Oklahoma, Texas, LSU. Just keep one of them at a time. You build a class, you build around that very quickly. That's 2025. 2024, 8 were from Texas, 3 were from Houston, 3 from San Antonio. And he had 9 kids in 2023 from the state of Texas. 3 of those are from Houston. This is consistently a place that puts out some of the top talent in America. And it's consistently a place where that top talent leaves. Matthew Mitchell is in charge of building a program that keeps that talent home. Now, he's talked the right things about discipline, and he's talked the right things about effort and intensity and defense, and he preaches a lot of the right things. But ultimately, the all-star coaching staff has got a lot of ties to recruiting Texas and Houston. The players he's looking at are recruiting high-end players. This is going to come down to, can Mitchell and staff get the best kids in Houston, in Texas, to come to stay at Houston? I don't think that's super far-fetched. I don't think that's super crazy. I do think it's something we haven't seen done in a long time, and I'm excited to see it happen. I frankly think it's a very high possibility that it does happen. They have an elite coach in Matthew Mitchell. I keep wanting to say Miller, but I'm not going to say Miller. It's Matthew Mitchell. I probably should have notes organized differently on my screen here. But Mitchell comes in with a plethora, a multi-time SEC Coach of the Year when he was at Kentucky. Won a bunch of games in conference play in the SEC. Won a bunch of NCAA tournament games. Put a bunch of women in the WNBA. They had a track record of success while he was there. He just unfortunately got hurt and had to take a step backwards for a little bit. Right now, he's at Houston. It's all steps forward. And I think that's going to be really exciting to see. So as we approach the offseason, we do have spring football to get to this week. I know the spring football game is Saturday. We do have whatever news pops up in the men's program, which is national level news at this point for the men's program. When stuff pops up with them, Miles Suzanne, his trek into his dabbling in the NBA combine and all that kind of stuff too, right? That all has to happen. But keep an eye on this women's program, and we'll be doing it here each and every day as more comes out over the course of the offseason with the women's college basketball program at the University of Houston. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every single day, which is also Matthew Mitchell's team every single day. Go Coogs.